Today, we see if gamers enjoyed getting stepped on by a very large lady vampire, or did the werewolves scare them away? I think you know how this turns out. Let's find out if anyone played Resident Evil Village. First, I want to say thank you to all the new viewers on the channel. The response to our videos recently have been tremendous, and it really does mean a lot to feel the outpouring of support for these videos and our little channel. So thank you all very much. Now let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am BD, and this is Did Anyone Play, a series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have actually played a game like Resident Evil Village. How do we do this? We use trophy and achievement milestones within games and then compare those results to an ever-growing database to evaluate and rank games compared to the rest of the industry. Using objective data and statistical comparisons, we can draw conclusions. We aren't reviewing the game in a traditional sense. Our goal is to provide analysis that can be better used to understand player preference while ignoring game sales and hype to ensure we see reality as it truly is. Please drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want more of these types of videos. We're just starting out, so anything you can do is very much appreciated, and a quick spoiler warning as we may be talking about some elements of late game progression. So let's find out if anyone actually played Resident Evil Village on Xbox, PS4, PS5, and Steam. Remember that all percentages we'll be talking about here come from the total number of players that actually launched and or played the game, not bought the game, so these results are a full reflection on how players played Resident Evil Village. The first milestone that players will reach is called Not Liking This. This milestone is achieved once a player first reaches the village and ultimately survives a horde of lycans. So how many players made it to this first very early milestone for Village? On Xbox, 74.7% of players got to this first milestone. For PS4, it was 83.3%, for PS5, 72.3%, and for Steam, it was 86.8%. So let's pause here to evaluate. Steam and PS4 are off to a strong start. Xbox is right on the average, but PS5 is performing a little weaker. The loss of around 25% of players on Xbox and PS5 at the start is not the best. Here's a quick look in graph form, and I've put the database average up there. Steam and PS4 are well above the average for Milestone 1, so that's good. And while low, PS5 is sitting right around the average for the database. So what is Resident Evil Village? Well, it's a survival horror game where you play as Ethan Winters, who is searching for his kidnapped daughter. As it goes in Resident Evil, he finds himself looking for his daughter in the village, which is filled with mutant creatures. A player will scavenge for resources, manage their inventory, and engage in a lot of combat. It was developed and published by Capcom. Resident Evil Village released for all platforms in May of 2021. The second milestone all players would likely reach is called That Sucked. This is awarded after a player completes the castle and faces off against a mutated Lady Dimitrescu. That's how you have to say it. Legally, that's how I have to say it. So for Steam, 71.5% of players made it this far. PS4 is at 70%, PS5 is at 56.9%, and Xbox is at 60.4%. So it's about the same rate of decline as the start of the game. A little better for sure, and the best news is that everyone is above average except PS5. It's always good to understand the competition a game was up against when it launched. What was happening around May 7th, 2021 in the gaming world? Well, titles like Mass Effect Legendary Edition, MLB The Show 21, and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance came out around this time on the platforms. Looking at Google Trends here, we see that Resident Evil Village in Blue was very strong at the time of release. So hype was big for Village, but also the competition was fairly weak. One note here is that Google Trends got weird when I tried to set it to worldwide, so this data is unfortunately only for the United States this time, but that's what we've got. We like to pick a mid-game milestone for our third marker. For Village, we chose Fish Out of Water. This is awarded after completing the final fight with a mutated Moreau. How many players are left at this point in the game? For Xbox, it's at 55.3%, for PS4 we have 65.2%, PS5 has 52.3%, and finally for Steam, 65.5% are left. This is actually an incredible hold as Village is losing only 5% or less players from Milestone 2. All platforms are now way above average. This is impressive. How did Resident Evil Village do with critics? Well, Metacritic for PlayStation has it at an 84 out of 100. For Xbox, it was an 83 out of 100. And for Steam, the reviews show overwhelmingly positive, recent and all-time, with over 70,000 reviews. These are very good reviews, and you can see that even major review outlets scored Resident Evil Village strongly with an average around 84. The reception was great for the game overall. The most important milestone is our fourth one. This is for completing the main story and what we ultimately will be basing our final score on. It definitely shows how many players finished the game and truly played Village. This milestone is Great Dad, and is awarded for completing the story on at least casual difficulty. Where does Resident Evil Village end up on the different platforms? On Xbox, 49.7% of players completed the game. For Steam, it was 61.1%. On PS4, 59.2% did just that. And on PS5, 84.3% completed the story. Let's pause here so we reach the end of the game. We want to check the percentage of players that quit each platform after making it through the first milestone but failing to reach game completion. Here, all platforms are doing tremendously better than the database average. PS4 is the best, but only by the slimmest of margins over Steam. Xbox and PS5 are statistically equal, but what we can say is that after players got into the game, they really stayed on. It's a fairly remarkable graph here. Finally, to get a feel of how completion is treated this game, the rare milestone 5 chosen for Village is called Knives Out. This milestone can be achieved if the player can make it through the game using nothing but close combat weapons. One bright spot is that some boss fights are excluded from this requirement. This achievement can be done on casual difficulty. So for Xbox, we see that 2.1% of players reach this milestone. For PS4, it was 3.9%, for PS5, it's at 3.6%, and for Steam, 3.6% of players did it as well. Now let's see the full picture. Here are the raw milestones for our platforms for Resident Evil Village, and we've also added the database averages for each milestone in gray for comparison purposes. Let's get into it. For Village, we do see an initial drop at milestone 1. It's generally above average, so not the worst, but if there is a weak point in the data, it's happening at milestone 1 and milestone 2. But again, Village are performing above average, so it's a minor issue. But looking at milestone 3 and 4, we have nearly a flat line. So few players quit the game through the hefty part of the story and saw it all the way to the end. This is huge. Village is providing a benchmark many other games could only dream of. Looking at milestone 5, we see PS4 with a slight lead with Steam and PS5 tied for second. So this is our final tally for Resident Evil Village milestones. But now let's see how the game stacks up against all other games in our database and find out if anyone truly played Village. We use milestone 4 as our ultimate ranking target. Here are the results for each platform for milestone 4 once again. It's time to reveal the final score Resident Evil Village has in our database. Here we go. Steam is a 10 out of 10. Xbox is a 10 out of 10. PlayStation 4 is a 10 out of 10. And PlayStation 5 is a 9 out of 10. We need to stop and soak this in for a moment. This result is incredible. Resident Evil Village is the most played game we have seen yet. It's dethroned Marvel's Spider-Man at the top. And it does speak volumes that Xbox is up there too. Since this game was not on Game Pass, we don't see a huge drop-off for that platform. No Game Pass effect here. So those are the scores, but let's see if we can tease out some other observations by looking at these results in different ways. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each milestone shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular point. Here we see that throughout the story, all the way to milestone 4, PS5 leads in losses, while Steam loses the least. You can again see that from milestone 2 to milestone 4, all platforms retain players extremely well, with only about a 10% loss. Moving on, we can look at milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account the player population loss as a percentage compared to the previous milestone. Aside from milestone 5 retention, which is normally extreme, you can see that milestone 1 and milestone 2 is where all the losses come from. PS5 has the highest losses through those two milestones, but does better at 3 and 4. How about completionists? How did the rarest milestones shake out on the different platforms? Here we see PS4 takes nearly 30% of the results, with Steam and PS5 tied for second, and Xbox making up a respectable 15.8% at the end. Finally, we check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. Early game, Steam and PS4 are dominating, with PS5 lagging behind the most. For the end game, we actually see that all platforms perform exceptional and are pushing off the graph, which is the first time we are seeing this for endgame losses. Finally, for completionists, we see PS5 slightly ahead of the others. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and their milestone 4 results, but this time we show the full percent rank within our database. This is to give you a detailed view of how rankings played out. Use this data as you will. Let's wrap this up. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Resident Evil Village truly rose to the top here. It's the highest performing, most played game we've evaluated so far. Steam, PlayStation 4, and Xbox were all ranked 10 in our database, and that's unbelievable. PS5 was no slouch at a ranking of 9 either. Village achieved this by having the strongest endgame retention we've ever seen. This should be a model for all other single-player games. What Village did to retain players is exceptional, and not at all common in the gaming world. Other studios should study and emulate the reasons for success here. The only weakness in the armor was early game retention, and even that wasn't much of a weakness. Consider it an area of improvement, where there might be opportunities to get players to stay engaged a bit more and not drop as early. Resident Evil Village came to gamers with big hype and strong reviews. Let's face it, Resident Evil is a huge brand. Games, movies, and streaming shows, but a game still has to be great to keep the gamers engaged, and that's exactly what Village is. Clearly a great game that players love to complete, and a best-in-class example of how games should be structured and treat the gamer. And that's why gamers rewarded all that hard development work by experiencing everything the game had to offer. Hopefully this data can help inform even better outcomes in the future, and I think we need to look into even more Resident Evil titles soon to find out if this is a normal trend or a one-off. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions do you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.